Yes, dear. Find if I start every exchange with Sharon with yes, dear, I'm always in good shape. Good morning. The faithful. So good to see you. What, dear? You think so? My coffee. Yes, dear. So, if not now, when? Was that awesome? Wow. Wow. Mark Twain wrote, "Why put off to tomorrow what you can put off to the day after tomorrow?" And I saw a sign the other day that said, "Someday I'm going to get some help for my procrastination problem." You know, in Freebo's song, he writes, now listen to this. "When I was a young boy, I had these dreams, and time didn't matter, or so it seemed. Now I'm still a dreamer like I was back then, but time keeps screaming, if not now, when?" So if not now, when? If not in this moment, when? What is keeping us from living the dreams that we desire to live? What is it? You know, I'm just getting ready to leave Tuesday morning early with my son Jesse, and we're going to Boston and New Hampshire for a week of vacation. And I'm really excited. I was born in Boston. We're going to sightsee Boston for 2 days, and we're also going to New Hampshire for a family reunion. My aunt's turning 70. And this Wednesday is my 56th birthday, July 31st. And in the evening, I'm going to my spiritual home, the Temple of Baseball, Fenway Park. Because while my spirituality is religious science, my religion is the Boston Red Sox. I was born at Beth Israel Hospital on July 31st, 1957, 56 years ago, the official hospital of the Boston Red Sox. I was born 1,803 feet from home plate on the third floor in the maternity ward where my mom was actually a nurse at the time. That's how I know this. My parents lived right on Brookline Avenue, right in between Fenway Park and Beth Israel Hospital. And I've been a Red Sox fan all my life. I watch every Red Sox game pretty much. And yet, it's since coming to California in 1975, it's been over 40 years since I've seen a Red Sox game at Fenway Park. And I have to tell you that my emotions about this trip and going to Fenway Park are completely out of control. I cry. My kids make fun of me. I cry during regular season Red Sox games. You know, I love Boston. I love growing up in New England. I love all the roads with the rock walls. You know, all those rock walls are there because, you know, New England was a glacial, in the last ice age, it was covered by a glacier. So when the glaciers melted and receded, they left all these rocks in all the fields, and nobody could plow or farm. So everybody took all the rocks and built road cairns along the sides of the roads. I love New England. I don't know if does anybody else have that feeling about a place where you grew up but haven't lived in for 40 years? I feel like it's my home. I feel like it's my spiritual home. And I'm really excited to go there, and I have this deep emotional connection to it. And so, as I said, this particular trip is because my Aunt Rhoda, my mom's younger sister, who was very close to my mom and who was very helpful to us during the last couple of years of my mom's life. She used to fly from New Hampshire all the way to California to spend weeks with my mom when my mom was going through chemo. And she's having her 70th birthday and 50th wedding anniversary. And so, and Sharon and I and a lot of people from around here, we've been going to Asilomar every summer, year after year after year, our religious science summer conference. So haven't been traveling much to New England. And in fact, my mom and dad lived here on the West Coast right up until they both passed away. And we've spent lots of time visiting Sharon's family in Canada, but not much time. So I'm really excited to take Jesse and see Boston and go to Faneuil Hall and go to the USS Massachusetts and the Constitution and Harvard. And when I was growing up in New England for many, many summers, my sister Amy and I went to summer camp in New Hampshire. And summer camps in New England and New York and Pennsylvania are not like summer camps anywhere else. They really are the ultimate summer camp experience. And Amy and I, my sister and I, went to a Jewish summer camp called Camp Tel Noar, which in Hebrew means the hill of happiness. And this place really was the hill of happiness for us. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I went there for like 5-6 years, and Amy went there for 10 or more years. And, you know, the sports and the swimming and the color war. You know what color war is? It's like what they do at Hogwarts, where all the houses compete against each other for the House Cup. Well, at Camp Tel Nor, they had the 3 teams of the camp. There was the Negev, the south team, and the Galil, the north team, and the Sharon. I don't know where Sharon was, but they had a team too. And we would compete, and the entire camp was divided up into sub-teams. Like if you were in my age group, you'd be like on Galil Blue. And Galil Blue would play softball against Negev White on the Dell Diamond at 2 o'clock. And all summer long, they would add up the points. And at the end of the summer, they'd have a big banquet. And at this banquet, they would name, you know, who got the House Cup. And there was no magic, but it was still a lot of fun. But what there was the best kosher food at any. The guy who was the chef, and wasn't even Jewish, he was the head chef at Brown University and used to come up for the summer. And it was, with all the physical activity we used to do, you could still put on weight at Camp Tel Nor because the food was so good, this great kosher food. And a lot like our CSL youth camp that our kids just went to, this was a place that celebrated us and our spirituality and our culture and our individuality, and it's really the place where I fell in love with God. It's the place where I first felt a real human experience that the divine was close. And, of course, it was a beautiful setting on a beautiful lake in New Hampshire. And on Fridays, when you're Jewish, on Fridays, Shabbat, the Sabbath, we would have our Sabbath service about 5:30 on a Friday afternoon, and all camp activities would end at 3 o'clock on Friday, and everybody would go back to their bunk. In Hebrew, they're called the chug. We'd go back to our bunk and take our showers and put on our blue shorts and our white tops and our head coverings, our kippot, and then we would troop off to this beautiful chapel in the woods overlooking the lake and have our Friday evening service overlooking this lake at sunset. And that's where I fell in love with spirituality and where I decided at the time to become a Jewish cantor, which is what I did in my 20s. I went to school and studied and became a cantor. And then that was before I got the divine call to be a metaphysician and I guess, and you can see I'm still Jewish in many ways. Look at my hands. I'm still Jewish. And I guess I'm still a cantor, only I'm a New Thought cantor now. So, and we also learned about our Jewish heritage and culture at Camp Tel Nor, and it was a really important experience for me. And so when we were planning this trip, I said to my sister, and because a lot of us are going to be there, I said to my sister, so we're going to be in New Hampshire. Wouldn't you like to go visit Camp Tel Nor and just have that experience again? And she immediately said, no, I'm never going back there again. Now, this was really shocking to me because even though I went there for 5 summers, she went there for like 10 and became a counselor. And she also made some lifelong friendships at this camp. And so I asked her why she wouldn't be interested in visiting such an emotionally important place. And she told me that the last time she had visited, like 10 years ago, there had been a new camp director and an entirely new staff who didn't know her, and they actually treated her kind of shabbily. They're like, why are you visiting us? Why are you here? And it really hurt her feelings very deeply, and so she was not going to go and have her feelings hurt again. And that just didn't really sound like Camp Tel Nor to me. Didn't sound like my experience of it at all. And this conversation we were having was on 4th of July. And I'm sitting in my living room on 4th of July watching the Red Sox game. And I had my laptop in my lap, so I looked up Camp Tel Nor. And they have a beautiful website now. And I noticed that one of the tabs said annual alumni Shabbat. So I looked, and they had a whole bunch of dates for 2012, but they didn't have any dates for alumni Shabbats listed for 2013. And I looked down the bottom of the page, and it had, email links, director, nurse, whatever, main office. So I clicked on this email link. I don't know what made me do it right in that moment. If not now, when? The divine intuitive message said, do something about this right now. And as Sharon will tell you, I am the anti-procrastinator. I am, and it really kind of ticks her off, because I'll go, sometimes she says, because I'll go, oh, I got to go do this, and then I'll walk out the room. She'll go, where are you going? I said, I'm going to do this, whatever. I'm like, I don't let the grass grow. So I looked on the website, and I saw the link, and I went down the bottom of the link, and an email came up to this woman I'd never heard of, Molly Butter. So executive director. So I sent this email. Hi, I'm Doug LeBeau. I'm an alumni from the 60s and 70s. I've been living in California for 40 years. My sister, Amy Lebo Korn, was also a camper and counselor for more than 10 years. And I have many, many cousins with the last names of Lebo and London who were also campers too. Do you happen to be having an alumni Shabbat this summer? Will be in town August the 2nd, Friday, August the 2nd. And I hit send. So I'm watching the Red Sox game, and 10 minutes later, I get an email. And the email reads, I'm going to read it to you. Oh, my God, you're the LeBeau family who moved away to California. I was your cousin Daniel's girlfriend at camp for many, many years. We grew up together in Framingham. Our moms were best friends. Yes, we're having an alumni Shabbat that evening, and we'd be honored to welcome you back to your spiritual home. Will Amy and Daniel and David be coming too? I hope so. Please come and visit us. Love, Molly Butter. So when my heart started beating again, I forwarded the email to my sister, and the second I hit send, I dialed her in West Hills, and I picked up the phone, and I heard, and she was so overcome with emotion that she couldn't even talk. For 5 minutes, I just stayed on the phone while she cried. You got to ask yourself, if not now, when? What stops us in any given moment from doing what we want to do, what divine intuition tells us to do? We hear the messages. What stops us? Fear? Regret? Laziness? I had an old friend, Baba Olatunji. Anybody ever hear of Olatunji? He was the master of the African drum, and he released over 20 albums of African drum music on Columbia, and he performed at Radio City Music Hall. He was really the man who was instrumental in bringing world music to the United States in the late 50s and early 60s when he was a government student at Columbia, because he was the son of the chief of his Nigerian tribe, and he had to come and learn government so he could go home and rule over 200,000 people, which he never did. He stayed in the United States and was a drummer. But he said, he taught me this. Good choice, right? He taught me this. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. And today's a gift, which is why we call it the present. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. And today's a gift, which is why we call it the present. If we fear, we're actually living in the future. And if we regret, we're living in the past. I get news for you. The future has not happened yet. And no matter what you do or how hard you try, unless you're living in a science fiction movie, you cannot change the past. Right? Gary, what'd you have for breakfast this morning? Eggs. Is there any way in this universe that you could change the fact that you had eggs for breakfast this morning? You had eggs. Right? Susan, what are you going to have for lunch today? She didn't even know. Right. And even if you say, I know exactly what I'm going to have for lunch, isn't it possible that that could change? Someone could invite you out for lunch, and you could say, well, I was going to go home, but sure. Or your car could break down in front of Magnolia Grill or Hugo's. Right? Someone could invite you out. The future is not set yet. The future is not set yet. The unexpected can often be an amazing surprise. I mean, look at what happened with Camp Tel Nor. My sister Amy was afraid of going back again, afraid of having her feelings hurt again, deeply, by a place that meant so much to her that she didn't even want to think about going back. But now instead, she's going home as an honored guest. And, interestingly enough, more than 20 of my cousins and friends from my youth are also joining us for this alumni event. And only because they heard about all this on Facebook, because they weren't going to go. They live in the New England area, but since they found out that we were going to be there, me and Jesse and Amy and Steve and our nephew John and my cousins David and Daniel, who, by the way, my mom raised. They were orphans, and my mom and dad raised them in our house after their dad, my mom's younger brother, passed away. So now more than 20 of us are going. And why? Because I clicked send. I took the action. I didn't go, ooh, what will happen if I send this email? Will I be rejected? Will I be hurt? What will happen in the future? I didn't ask that question. I just clicked send. You can't change the past, but you can change the now. By doing that, we can change what we will experience in the future. And we always have a choice about doing that. What we do in the now, we know as metaphysicians, as religious scientists, what we do and think in the now has an influence on what we experience in the future, and no experience on what happened in the past except to our relationship to it. No matter what the facts of our life are in this very moment, we are at choice right now about how we face them. God's calling. And how much power we give them. I'll say that again. No matter what the facts are in our life at this moment, we are at choice about how we face them and what power we give them. The truth is that our life is divine. And our greatest gifts from the divine, that divine part of ourselves, are our intuition and choice. Our present does not have to be locked to anything that happened in our past. We quote this all the time. Dr. Holmes said, principle is not bound by precedent, but he goes on to say, we live in the realm where all things are possible, which says, behold, I make all things new. Don't carry with you a limited belief of the reason why anything cannot be. Don't carry with you a limited belief of the reason why something can't happen. All things are possible. You can change the past only in science fiction movies. You can change the now because you are the divine. You have the divine spark of choice within you in every moment. We call it volition. My sister Amy's experience next week at Camp Tel Nor is not going to be what her past experience was last time she visited. She could have completely missed the wonderful homecoming that we're going to have if she had allowed what happened in the past to dictate her decision, and if I had not just clicked send. We live in the now, and yet I know, and those of you who know me who know, I've often been ruled by fear of how something may turn out in the future or regret of how I've done something in the past. You know, I've done some pretty dumb stuff that I've regretted, and I'm a complete sucker for time travel movies where you can go back in the past and change things. Back to the Future, 1, 2, 3. Terminator, where they actually beat the robots in the past so that they could have a life in the future. Our own Jonathan Frakes. Jonathan, are you here today? No, Jonathan Frakes directed one of my favorite movies, Star Trek First Contact, where the Enterprise crew goes back in time to save us in the future from the Borg by going and getting rid of them in the past. And Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, where they save the humpback whales in the future by going to the past and grabbing them and taking them with them to the future. But my favorite one of my favorite ones, is this movie called Frequency. You ever seen this one? Jim Caviezel and Dennis Quaid in this movie, where Jim Caviezel plays a policeman who solves a crime in the present and the past with his dead dad by talking to him over a ham radio whose transmission is all messed up by gamma rays from the aurora borealis because of sunspots. You follow that one? It's always sunspots. I love all these movies. If you go back to the past and change the past, though, you have to be really careful because you can mess up the past and eliminate yourself in the present. Or you can eliminate people that you love in the present, or they won't know you. And if you're really not careful, you can go back to the past and create an alternate timeline, and then you really screw things up even though you're making millions at the box office. But my favorite, my absolute favorite metaphysical movie of all time has to be Groundhog Day. Right? Groundhog Day? Have you seen it with Bill Murray? Yeah? So in the movie Groundhog Day, Bill Murray plays Phil Connors. He's an obnoxious, self-centered Pittsburgh weatherman. He's on assignment in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania for Groundhog Day. You know, the day the groundhog comes out and whether he sees his shadow or not decides whether we're going to have 6 more weeks of winter or whether spring is coming early. So he has to go to Punxsutawney to report on Punxsutawney Phil. And this guy, Phil, he's just the most awful boor of a guy, right? He's obnoxious. He's self-centered. He's without any spiritual center. He's without any moral center. And so on the morning of February 2nd, Groundhog Day, which also happens to be Reverend Sharon's and my wedding anniversary. Yes, dear. On the morning of February 2nd, he wakes up in his hotel room, and he goes out, and during the course of his day, he ticks off everybody. He insults the locals. He generally makes a complete ass of himself. And as it happens, and this is the funny bit, he's not actually able to go home to Pittsburgh that night because he neglects to predict the biggest snowstorm of the season. And he's the weatherman. He's such an idiot. So he has to stay over one more night, and he wakes up in the morning on what he thinks is now February 3rd, but it's still February 2nd, Groundhog Day. He finds that he's reliving Groundhog Day over and over and over again. At first, he tries to use this supernatural thing to get girls. You know, he listens in on pretty women's conversations in the restaurant, and then the next day, he uses that information and makes a love connection with them. Oh, weren't we in Mrs. Wright's second grade class together? Don't you remember? Because she was talking about that last night, you know. He's just such a sleaze. He listens in on all these conversations. Over time, which he seems to have plenty of, he realizes, though, that the real object of his affections is his TV weather producer, Rita, who's played by Andie MacDowell, right? So he's got lots and lots of time, so he investigates her, and he finds out that what she prizes most of all is French poetry. So he learns to speak fluent French. Now, imagine to yourself how long that takes, right? So years later of every day, he's been practicing his French poetry, and he goes and gets her somehow to come out to dinner, and then he starts spouting off French poetry. And, of course, she sees right through him because it's all ulterior motive, right? It's all about getting something. And he gets so depressed when he can't get Rita that he literally kills himself again and again and again. Electrocution, jumps off buildings, jumps in front of trains. He kills himself 30 times. She always shoots him down. Yet every day at 6 a.m., he wakes up again to the same day, Groundhog Day, over and over again. But ultimately, something does happen to change him. You remember what it is? A guy that he sees in the street every day, a homeless guy, dies. And he realizes that he could have taken better care of him. So the next day, he makes it his mission. He gets up in the morning, he sees the guy, he grabs the guy, calls him by name, he takes him to the hospital, he feeds him, he clothes him, he makes sure he gets his medication, and the guy dies anyway. And at this point, Phil gives up. He surrenders. And he starts doing good just for the sake of doing good with no regard to the results. So every day he saves a boy who's falling out of a tree here. He changes a tire for a bunch of old ladies there. He counsels a young couple in marriage counseling over here. He does the Heimlich maneuver every day over here. Slowly, and even though he has only one day in which to do it, slowly, somehow, through doing his good for the sake of doing good, with no regard to the results, the entire town of Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania falls in love with him. And he falls in love with him. And he likes who he is. And he ends up bettering himself for the sake of bettering himself. And Rita sees who he is, and she falls in love with him too. She can't help but notice that. And at the end of the story, he wakes up the next day, and it's not Groundhog Day anymore. It's February 3rd. Now, there's a reason that this is my favorite metaphysical movie. It's because it reminds me every time I see it that I have a choice about how I'm going to face each day. Regardless of what the facts are, I have the choice of how I'm going to treat that day and let it treat me. I have the choice of just surrendering and turning my life over to thinking good without regard to the results. And I don't need it to be the same day over and over again to do it. I can get it right in any moment, even if the last moment seemed completely wrong. Even if I just did something so completely dumb, if I embarrassed myself, if I hurt somebody's feelings, if I made a bad decision at work, if I yelled at my kids, or even if I just ran through a red light and got myself a $400 ticket. It doesn't matter. In any moment, I can choose how I'm going to react to those facts of my life with the truth that my life is divine. There's a divine intuitive knowing in me all the time that always knows what to do, and I have choice about how I'm going to use it. Even if I was thinking thoughts that are so personally destructive that you just know it's going to manifest something truly awful. Ever have those? I call them the nuclear explosion of negative thought. You ever have one of those? When you get a bill from the hospital for $103,000, right? Or you get a cancellation on your insurance, or you get a letter. You know, there was a thing on the minister's listserv this week. Jonathan and I were talking about the fact that we almost can't even read the minister's listserv this week because there's so much crazy stuff on it. But Centers for Spiritual Living went ahead and made a diversity movie. And there was a lot of talk about this diversity movie. And it reminded me, I one time had a friend, a gay, black interior designer friend of mine, who told me, you don't know what being in a minority is like. You were born Jewish, and the Jews are not a minority, and in fact, they run everything. And I said to him, first of all, okay, the Jews are actually a very small minority if you look at the numbers. I said, and anti-Semitism has been rampant for 1,000 years, but, okay, I have to admit that growing up as a middle-class American Jewish guy, I didn't really ever feel any kind of discrimination until I became a religious science minister. And then all of my cousins started sending me letters. I had one cousin, an Orthodox cousin, who actually sent me a letter that said, okay, so you wanted to study metaphysics and mysticism. Couldn't you have studied with a bona fide, ordained Kabbalah rabbi? You had to go and turn Gentile and turn your back on your family? You never know where this stuff is going to rear its ugly head. It doesn't matter. No matter what happens in our life, we have a divine intuitive knowing and a divine choice about how we're going to react to it. In this now, right now, I can always choose again. Dr. Holmes writes, we cannot live a choiceless life. Every day, every moment, every second, there is a choice. We have the right to choose what we wish to experience. We have the right to choose what we shall induce in mind. Freebo ended his song with this line, I make this vow, I swear, amen. My time is now. If not now, when? You always have a choice. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. And today is a gift, which is why we call it the present. If not now, when? Namaste.